Hey guys, today I'll be sharing my highest solo DPS setup for the Tempest as well as my Raids build setup. And they're pretty similar, but I'll be showing the differences between them. But first of all, let's just do a DPS test. And this is for the highest solo DPS setup. So we'll just go for 10 seconds here and see how much damage we can output. Okay, and there we go. So we did about 4.56 million damage per second. So as you can see, the highest damage in the build is the primary attack, which is Wind Edge in this build. And obviously this isn't a super high damage number, but I've been trying so many different kinds of builds after the Storm Fury was shadow fixed. And with the essence that we currently have in the game for the Tempest, this is the highest DPS I could get. So first, let's start with the skills and the essence that I'm using. So for the skills, I'm using Breaker, Blade Dance, Crosswinds, and Storm Fury. And for the primary attack, I'm using the Wind Edge. So for the essence, I'm actually using two essence for Blade Dance, which is the Unmoored Eyes helmet and also the chest. This is the main reason that I'm using Blade Dance, is this chest right here, which reads that Blade Dance also increases your primary attack speed for 2 seconds by 50%. So this is a huge amount of primary attack speed gain, probably the highest of all the essence that we have for the Tempest class. So this makes your primary attack just deal so much more damage. This helmet is okay. It's doing a very decent amount of damage. And unfortunately, there aren't any really good helmet slots for Blade Dance. If we look at the skills here, this helmet is doing a decent amount of damage, 47,000, almost 48,000 damage, and also 26,000 damage when you strike again. But the main reason we're using this helmet is there isn't really any other decent options for Blade Dance on the helmet slot. Most helmet essence for the Tempest class are all Cascade essences. So because we're not using Cascade in this build, I decided to go for this helmet choice. So next, which is the Shoulders and Pants essence, which is usually the Breaker slot or the Flowing Strike slot. I've gone for Breaker in this case, and we've obviously gone for the Breaker damage shoulders, which says that Breaker increases your damage by 19% for 4 seconds. And for the Pants, I've gone for the Prolix pair, which reads that Breaker now conjures 2 Zephyrs that crash together on waves, damaging and knocking back enemies. And it also gives you 7.2% Breaker cooldown, which is pretty nice. I would say that this does a very decent amount of damage, but the main thing is these 2 Zephyrs. It's very nice to have an extra 2 Zephyrs in your setup, especially if you're using Storm Fury to buff them up. So next, we're using Crosswinds, which is one of the best skills to use for the Tempest. So I'm obviously using the Shriekworth and the Hurricane Hitch essences here to buff it. And I've already explained what these essences do. This will give you the 4 extra blades when it shatters and hits an enemy. And then this is the one that makes it work with your primary attack and also applies it to the Zephyrs and allows them to also use the Crosswind skill. So for the last 2 essence, I'm using both essence which buff the Wind Edge primary attack. So the first one is Fiendfell. Wind Edge becomes empowered every 6 seconds, causing your next primary attack to unleash a piercing wind that deals 11,000 damage. And it also causes them to take 19% increased damage for 3 seconds. And also this is a very good slot to awaken, so I've got both my awakenings on the Wind Edge. I think that these are probably the best 2 slots to awaken for this build, just because they give you the 10% increased primary attack damage. So talking about the second offhand, we're using the No Second Chances offhand, which also buffs your Wind Edge and causes it to do additional damage when you strike twice. So for the set pieces, it comes as no surprise that I'm using 4 pieces of Vithus Urge to give me the 30% beneficial and 30% increased attack speed. We just have to go for this set. It works very well with the primary attack setup. And then we're using 4-piece Gloom Guide, which will give you 15% increased damage after using a dash skill and also 22.5% damage after using a dash. In this case, the dash is not actually Breaker. Because of these pants, Breaker actually loses the dash tag, and in this case the dash is actually coming from our Blade Dance. So we actually have 100% uptime of Gloom Guide with this Blade Dance setup. So next, let's talk about the Cursed and also the Ancestral properties that I'm using. So for the Cursed properties, I'm using 4 pieces of Vex, which gives you 130% increased damage, but the main thing is it also gives you this 24% increased attack speed for the summons, and this triggers once every 50 seconds. So to be honest, you don't really need this so much. I mean, it's very nice to have it in the dummy test, and it will give you that extra kick of damage, but if you can't get this, I wouldn't worry too much about it. For the Ancestral properties, I've gone for the increased damage for 6 seconds, and I've got 3 triggers of it here. This can be changed in your warband, and as well as this, I've gone for the damage warband room. So if you go here and go to your room management, you can switch this out Usually most people like to use the Protector one because of the increased size Remnant, but I've gone for the Attacker. And for the Remnants, I've got these two here, which are probably the most useful ones for the Attacker room. So if you can get your hands on those in your Warband, then go for this room here. Otherwise, I wouldn't worry too much about that as well. So next, let's talk about the Legendary Gems. Honestly, my Legendary Gem setup isn't the most optimal. You can probably optimize this further and do much more damage than me, but I'm using Fervent Fang, and I'm trying to get this one to rank 10, hopefully soon. Probably with the next Battle Pass, I'll get this one to rank 10. Next, we're using Bloodsoaked Jade, definitely one of the best gems in the game, and you want to be using this on pretty much every single build. Can't remember the last time I haven't used this gem on a setup. And next, we have the Echoing Shade. In this setup, this works extremely well. I already explained how this works with the Storm Fury skill in my last video. If you haven't watched that video, you should check it out. But yeah, this works very, very well with any skill that buffs summons, and in this case, it's Storm Fury in our build. So next, we have Bottled Hope. We have buff skills, which is the Storm Fury once again, so this is nice. It will give us the extra damage increase. Here I'm using Howler's Call with the Gloomcast Auxiliary. Because this is a primary attack build, obviously we'll be stacking our primary attack speed and doing quite a lot of Gloomcast hits, so this is a very nice addition to the build. So next we have Svensson's Haunting. I'm using the Rolling Consequence Auxiliary, and this gives us an extra 12% crit chance when it triggers, which is really nice, and also a burning effect to help us maintain the Firestorm. And this is a really, really nice gem to have. We already have crit chance coming from the magic attributes in our legendary items, and we also have crit chance coming from the Gloom's Guide, so this is a nice addition to the build just to reach as high crit chance as possible. Talking about crit chance, we're also using Mother's Lament, which will give us 32% extra crit chance at rank 10, which is a really nice addition to this build. And then lastly, we're using Pain Clasp here. So lastly, for the Paragon tree, I'm using 2 nodes of the Weaver tree, which is the 6.5% crit when you're at 10 stacks, and also the 10% increased damage when you're at 10 stacks, the Unseen Dynamism. And then I'm using 3 nodes of the Duelist tree. So we have the Bloodthirst, Fury, and Superiority. So these give a 1% increased damage per stack, and this one gives 1% increased crit chance per stack, and these can stack up to 5 times, and then this node makes them stack up to 10 times, so effectively it's 10% damage and 10% crit. But you lose all of your stacks when you take damage. So on the dummy, this is the setup that I like to use. Usually because you are taking damage when you do raids, I like to take these off actually and go for the extra stacks of Weaver, and then also take the 2 nodes of the Ranger tree just to get the extra damage and the extra crit chance. So those are my 2 Paragon setups that I like to use. So now that we've gone over the highest solo DPS damage setup, I'll show how I like to change this build up for the raids build. So for the raids build, I actually like to use a bit of a different setup. I changed up these 2 essence here, and I keep everything else pretty much the same. So the reason why I'm changing these 2 essence is because we kind of want to have an armor break buff, which will buff the group in the raids, just to get the group to do more damage, because usually I'm not the highest resonance player in my raids, so I actually want to be buffing the other players as well. So there are 2 options for armor break for the Tempest, and those are either to use Squall, so you could switch up one of the main hand essence here for the 1000 Dooms, which reads that Squall now causes your Zephyrs to swiftly slash forward, damaging enemies and shattering their armor, and this effect can stack, and it actually stacks up to 3 times. But when I tested this essence, it wasn't working as expected, and I've seen other content creators also testing this, and it wasn't working as expected. So I didn't end up using this. I went for the other option, which is, like I said, to change up the Shoulders essence. So instead of going for the Breaker skill here, I actually went for the Vortex Armor Shatter, which is working very well. So this will give you Armor Shatter, which will increase the damage they take by up to 28.5% for 3 seconds. And I just went for this essence here. And then because these Breaker Pants are no longer useful because we're not using the Breaker skill, I actually changed this up to the Zephyrs. Now also increase your attack speed by 13.3%. And this is the one that I ended up going for. So once I've switched these 2 essence over, I also switched the Breaker skill out for Vortex, which is here. So I just switch this out, and once that's done, that's my raid build complete, guys. And yeah, this build does slightly less damage in a solo, but in a group, this build actually does a lot more damage just to buff the group with Vortex. So I could see that this is the build to be used for both Gauntlet and also raids. Now I'll be doing a 10-second damage setup just to show how this build performs on the dummy. So with this setup, because we're not having any skills that actually summon Zephyrs besides our passive skill, we just want to be spamming every skill when it's off cooldown. With the solo DPS, because you have Breaker, you actually want to be using Breaker first just to summon the 2 Zephyrs before using your Storm Fury. So as you can see, this build does about 3.7 million damage, which is about 800k less than the solo DPS. So this is because we've lost the ability to summon the extra 2 Zephyrs from Breaker, but instead we've gained the 24% armor break effect from Vortex, which helps a lot in the group setup. So here I decided to try the last boss of Hell 3, and this is using my solo DPS setup, which is the first setup I showed in this video. So let's just see how it goes. Having Blade Dance as a dash and also having the Wind Edge, which allows you to kind of snap to the target, is also very nice and makes this build actually pretty fun to play. So once the new difficulties are added to the game, I could see a build like this being used just if we need the extra DPS with mobs having more HP, and I will be updating my builds if that's the case. But for now, as you can see, I'm just shredding through this right now. Just finishing off these little spiders here, and then we'll get the infamous cutscene of this raid. And here's the cutscene I was talking about. It feels like they added this one as an inside joke, if I'm being honest, but there we go. And let's just see if I can actually skip the flower phase of the boss. So if you do deal enough damage, and usually this is in a group, you will be able to skip the flower phase of this boss completely. And as you can see, I've just taken down this boss with ease solo, so this build is actually working very well for the Tempest class, and I urge you guys to try it out. But yeah, with that, I'll be signing off here, guys. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you like the build, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.